안녕하세요. 매일매일 운동하기를 실천하고 있는 동탄 왕호입니다. 운동해야지. 진짜 운동 너무 하기 싫어요. 진짜 대박. 진짜 너무 하기 싫어. 퇴근하고 잠깐 앉아있다가 잠깐 인터넷 잠깐 보는데 오랜만에 이묘한과 홍진호 선수의 경기 3연봉 그거 보고 그 다음에 이묘한이랑 도진광 선수의 경기 그 선맵에서 싸우는 거 봐도 재밌네요. 여자들은 이런 거 이해 못한다고. 이 남자들은 이런 거 얘기하면은 밤새 얘기할 수 있는데 여자들은 이런 거 이해 못해요. 아무튼 재밌었습니다. 그 운동 너무 하기 싫은데 정신 가다듬고 이렇게 앉았습니다. 지금 9시 15분이에요. 운동하겠습니다. 운동하고 샤워하고 나오면 오늘 확진자 수 나와 있겠네요. 제발 확진자 수가 좀 줄었으면 좋겠습니다. 일단은 팔굽혀펴기랑 윗몸 일으키기 하고 힘 안 들면은 스쿼트 할게요. 역시 운동할 땐 CNN.
United States could have done something about it. He just chose not to. He chose to downplay it. So for him to repeatedly say it is what it is particularly galling when he is the friggin' president of the United States. I'm wondering, when you look at that exchange, Sanjay, now, what do you think?
I mean, it has nagged at me since that day, Anderson, February 26th, when I kept thinking to myself, does he not know? Because he just said to me that the flu is much worse. That was on February 26th. You just heard the tape from February 7th where he clearly conceded this coronavirus was far more lethal than the flu. And he again, even gave a number, 5 times more lethal than the flu. I mean, that really... it went from this idea that, look, maybe was he not being briefed? He just didn't care, so he wasn't even listening to what people were telling him. That's not the case. He knew. And at that time, and many times since then, he has lied about this. He knows the truth. He lied about this. And as you know, Anderson, I don't say that lightly, but that is definitely the case here. I should point out as well, we're talking about this a little bit like it's in the rearview mirror. I mean, we're still in the middle of this, right? We're sort of analyzing this. It's not over by any means. These bad decisions, these bad policies are still ongoing, and people that are alive today that don't really think that this is a big deal are not going to be alive by the end of the year because of this. So this absolutely needs to be fixed.
Jamie, after that interview with Woodward, in which the president acknowledged that coronavirus is airborne, way worse than the flu, he held 6 more rallies with tens of thousands of people indoors, thousands of people indoors, tens of thousands, with no masks or social distancing. And I mean, just look at his campaign event yesterday. He continued to mock mask wearing and put people's lives at risk. He's made mask wearing a political statement, which is the worst thing you can possibly do in the midst of a pandemic.
It's inexplicable. One of the things that Woodward asked Trump in the book is, what do you think the most important job of being president is? And Trump says, at first he's not sure what to answer. And then when he finally does, he said, well, it's to keep America safe and prosperous. He clearly knew a lot about this. He didn't keep America safe. He continues down that road with these inconsistent messages, with, mocking masks. But I just want to point out the second thing he said is to make America prosperous. And when I first heard the tape and he said he didn't want panic, what I really thought was that he was panicked about the economy and getting reelected.
Right, which is, I mean, he has repeatedly said early on, remember when he went to CDC, I think it was, and he said the thing about, anybody wants to test can get one. He talked about my numbers, meaning his as if the number of people infected in the country were a barometer on him, and he didn't want his numbers to go up. Dr. Spencer, thank you for everything you've done and continue to do, and for being with us tonight. Sanjay as well. I'll see tomorrow. Sanjay, I'll see you tomorrow night for our next edition of our CNN Town Hall, Coronavirus Facts and Fears. Jamie Dingale will come back to you in our next segment. I want to turn now to CNN Jim Acosta at the White House. Jim, talk about the president's explanation for downplaying the virus, even when he knew it was airborne, how deadly it was.
Well, you were talking about it a few moments ago, Anderson. The president was asked about these excerpts earlier today, and he said at one point that he wanted to be a cheerleader, that he didn't want to create panic. Anderson, he hasn't been a cheerleader, he's been a misleader. I mean, not giving people the opportunity to prepare to deal with this virus is essentially what this president is guilty of tonight, in the name of not wanting people to panic. You know, Anderson, you mentioned some of the things just a few moments ago, the rallies, the masks, and so on. Remember, during the spring, the president was urging his supporters to essentially storm state houses across the country and demand that their states be reopened. The president did that with the full knowledge that this virus was worse than the flu, more deadly than the flu. He was saying to Bob Woodward, as Jamie Gangel has been reporting, that this virus is not only dangerous for elderly people, but for younger Americans. And yet the president has been advocating children to go back to the classroom. And so the president tried to put up this excuse today that he didn't want people to panic. That's been echoed by Trump advisors, people inside the White House I've spoken to all day long. But that just glosses over months and months of lies, Anderson.
Yeah, you know, Winston Churchill, you know, the dawn of, you know, the beginning of World War II didn't say, oh, there's no way the Germans are going to come. There's no way they're going to, you know, they're going to fly planes over and bomb us. There's no way, you know, don't worry about this. It's just going to end. Leaders, true leaders, rise to the occasion and are honest with the people. And you know what? American citizens can handle the truth. It's stunning to me that anybody would accept a president saying, oh, well, we just didn't want to panic people. Yeah, you don't want to scream lies in a crowded theater, which essentially, frankly, this president has done many times in front of a large auditorium.
That's right.
But honesty and telling the truth. You know what? Americans have been through tough times before and rise to the occasion.
And Anderson, it's so much worse than that, because he lulled half of this country into a false sense of security. He told his own supporters, millions of Trump supporters around the country, that the scientists aren't to be trusted. I mean, remember, Dr. Fauci has said on repeated occasions, Dr. Anthony Fauci, who was on the task force, said on repeated occasions that he and his family have received death threats, that they're being harassed because there are so many people whipped up in this mode of hostility against public health experts and scientists in this country. He's brought people out to rallies and had them sign waivers, essentially signing their good health away to coax them into rallies so he can run his re-election campaign the way he sees fit. And Anderson, he is subjecting these people time and again to the coronavirus. We had a rally for all intents and purposes on the South Lawn of the White House for his Republican National Convention speech. On the South Lawn of the White House, as you remember, Anderson, people were sitting shoulder to shoulder, even though the president privately was saying to Bob Woodward he knew that this was a deadly virus.
And 6 indoor rallies, correct me if I'm wrong, after saying to Bob Woodward that it's airborne and far deadlier.
And that's just in the early weeks of the pandemic. Remember, there was that interim period where he didn't have rallies, and then there was the rally in Tulsa and these airport hangar rallies since then. And so tens of thousands of people have been exposed at his events.
Jim Acosta, appreciate it.
Oh.
Perspective now from CNN chief political analyst Gloria Borger, CNN political analyst Carl Bernstein, investigative reporter and author is also the legendary other half of Woodward and Bernstein, also CNN's Abby Phillip. Gloria, the president's justification downplaying the virus, didn't want to create panic, fear, and he added today the last thing he wants to do is show fear. Fear is the Trump campaign strategy. I mean, that is, he told Woodward himself in the last book that real power is fear. That was the title of the last book.
Yeah, and he's running on fear in this campaign, talking about the mobs in major urban areas, trying to tell people
provoking fear and stirring fear is fine when it suits his ends.
Well, Of course, totally. And I don't buy the argument, oh, I didn't want to create panic. This is a president. It was very revealing to me today when he had his little press conference and he said, leadership is about confidence. And what he really meant, I think, if you read between the lines, is he didn't want to appear to be weak. The worst thing you could tell Donald Trump is you're weak. And he didn't want blame, because what he was thinking about was, they're going to blame me, and I've got to get reelected, and I don't want to shut down the economy, and I don't want to do the things that perhaps science is telling me that I ought to do. So I'm going to look like I'm in control, even though it could cost people lives. I mean, it is transactional to the nth degree, and it is outrageous for a president of the United States who, as Jamie was saying before, says he wants to keep the country safe and prosperous. But you can't keep the country prosperous unless you keep the country safe. And that is what he totally abdicated his responsibility here.
Carl, certainly a lot of people wondering why the president talks about Woodward. You know, Woodward had already come out with a book that the White House quibbled with, and yet, and I guess some within the White House suggested the president shouldn't do it. Are you surprised that Woodward got the president to commit to 18 on the record interviews? And what do you make of the significance of what we heard so far?
I'm not surprised, because Trump regretted not talking to Woodward, or he said he regretted not talking to Bob after the last book. And Trump is always thinking that he can charm anyone. Well, he's not going to charm Bob Woodward. He's not going to charm a great reporter who is going to go and check everything out, and who is going to talk to dozens and dozens of the president's aides and find out what the real truth is. But let's just take a deep breath here about what we just heard on those tapes. These are the ultimate smoking gun tapes in our history. We have listened to the President of the United States commit probably the greatest felony by any president in our history. He sits there in real time talking and covering up his absolute dereliction, in which he ignores the national security of the United States, ignores the health and safety of the people of this country, in which he knowingly covers up what can cause tens of thousands of deaths. There's never been a stunning moment captured on tape by a leader. These aren't the Watergate tapes. This is something we've never had in our history. We've never had a president with this kind of attitude about the health and safety of the American people, willing for his own re-election efforts to just throw away lives. This is the ultimate felony by a president of the United States.
Abby, I mean, it's an interesting, you know, what Carl said is interesting. If you think about if this had been a foreign invasion coming, if, as the president had said it was, if this had been a hurricane coming, and the president had said, you know, at the time to Bob Woodward, well, I don't want to panic anybody about this hurricane, so I'm just going to say it's a Category 1 or a tropical storm and not really, you know, has the potential to really grow. No, we don't do that. People are informed about what the potential is, and people, again, rise to the occasion. Do you think it makes any difference? I mean, so many times the president has faced controversy without real political consequences. Do you think it's going to be any different this time?
Well, Anderson, you know, as you're saying that, the sad part about what you just said is that we've actually had an example of the president trying to, you know, literally Sharpie his way into a different version of a hurricane map. And this is a real thing that has actually happened, where the president creates his own reality, the one that he thinks fits his re-election prospects or his political prospects best. And this is just another version of that, involving the coronavirus, the consequences of which 190,000 people have lost their lives. But as far as whether this matters, I mean, you know, speaking to people around the president's campaign, in his campaign, you know, they kind of basically chalk this up to another bad news cycle, one of many, by the way, that he's had in several weeks, and that after a couple of days, a couple of weeks, this is going to all blow away. This is the pattern that they are used to since going back to 2016, that there's a cycle of controversy and the president is able to either write it out or another controversy comes
14분 했어요. 15분.
What's different though about this
팔굽혀펴기 5세트 했고
that is going to
복근 운동 4세트 했어요.
for a long time.
14분밖에 안 걸렸습니다.
once in 100-year event for this country. It will be written about in the history books. Indeed, this is the first version of the history
이번에는
books. And I don't
팔굽혀펴기는
think that
계속 할 거예요.
blow away. This is what the election
스쿼트
is going to be
하겠습니다.
about. And I think this one really is
스쿼트랑
going to stick.
팔굽혀펴기.
Gloria, President Trump had two campaign events yesterday, bringing
바로
together hundreds of people
시작하겠습니다.
without masks, not social distancing.
생각을 하면 안 돼.
He holds rallies, he loves them, he feels like that was part of why he won in 2016. I don't know if that's an excuse or he just really loves to perform and, be able to tell the same stories he's told before and have people laugh. Do you think that's something in the light of what he said on the Woodward tape that, well, of course, I'm not even going to ask this question, will he continue to do it? Of course he's going to continue to do it. Because he has no other...
Yes. He's going to look. Don't forget, Anderson. This is a president who, even recently, maybe it was last week, was retweeting conspiracy theories about the death toll from coronavirus.
Right.
That it really wasn't as large as it is. So, what's stunning is that I think, in some bizarre way, he was trying to impress Bob Woodward with what he knew. But by doing that, he set himself up. Because it's very easy if you go over the timeline, as you've been doing and Jamie's been doing, that he was saying one thing to Bob Woodward to tell him, oh, I know all this stuff. And on the other hand, lying to the American public, lying to the public and saying, oh, it's just the flu, it's nothing else. And it's so striking because, of course, he will continue it. Whether it'll make a difference in the election, we don't know at this point. But this is people's lives and their livelihoods here that he's playing with. And I think it may be
수고가 안 돼.
public.
Carl, when former FBI Director Comey, James Comey, was testifying before the Senate Intelligence Committee back in 2017, he was asked about Trump's tweet suggesting that Comey should hope there aren't tapes of their conversations. Comey responded saying, oh, Lordy, I hope there are tapes. The Woodward book and tapes don't give the president much room to deny anything. I mean, he's now sort of reshaping this as, he just didn't want to have panic. Do you think he's going to, what do you think he's going to do in the short term to get through this news cycle?
I don't know. He's going to be on Hannity at 9 o'clock tonight, so that's his usual default, to go over to Fox News and spin out something. But I think this time we are also talking about something that is shocking even to Republicans in Congress. What happened with Richard Nixon was that finally the Republican leadership, after hearing the smoking gun tapes, went down to the White House, marched down to the White House, including Barry Goldwater, the 1964 nominee of his party to be president, and told the president he must resign because of the crimes he had committed. I'm not going to suggest the Republicans are about to do that.
Yeah, I don't see Lindsey Graham doing that.
No, but they have to confront this. Because this is something unique that no president has allowed life for his own
10개 더.
as what we have here. And the other element of this that we always have to consider, what would a competent, real leader have done, honest leader in this instance? A few days, he gets this information, the State of the Union address is a few days off. What would a Roosevelt have done? He would have gone before Congress and said, we have a national emergency. We must come together as a people to fight this national emergency. Take the steps for open welfare. Instead, we have the most devastating cover-up. Happily, it's recorded, this cover-up, all these devastating tapes.
Carl Bernstein, Abby Phillip, Gloria Borger, thank you. Jimmy Dangale and Gloria are going to come back. Coming up next, the president's boast, to a word no less, about a secret weapon that he says China and Russia have not heard about. Well, they maybe kind of have now. And later, Joe Biden's reaction to all this as we continue.
Exclusive. Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden talks with Jake Tapper. With only 8 weeks until Election Day, what's Biden's strategy to win key states and reconnect with voters his party lost to Trump in 2016? The Lead with Jake Tapper. Friday.
I'm Matthew Chance in London. This is CNN.
그럼 잠깐 뉴스만 볼게요. 확진자 몇 명 나왔나 볼게. 왜 제가 뉴스만 틀면은 광고 시간일까요?
그 군의관의
치명은 광동제약이 까다롭게 고른 귀한 치명의 녹용.
실적으로 씀.
155명.
다양한 스페이스를 맞춤으로 씀.
155명이에요. 155명.
청소차에 대한 이런 편견.
아, 이거 일주일 더 연장할 것 같은데 2.5단계.
Most closely guarded secrets.
아, 이제는 숙박업소에서 파는 술도 다 누가 한다네요.
If in fact it's true. All that.
아, 155명? 어제가 몇 명이었죠? 130 몇 명이었나? 어제도 150명 뛰었던 것 같기도 하고. 아, 쉽게 안 줄어드네요. 쉽게 안 줄어들어.
So the president went as far as discussing a secret nuclear weapon system with Bob Woodward.
진짜 이러다가 추석 전까지 2.5단계 하고 추석 때 또 어떤 모임이 또 있는지 모르니까 추석 끝나고도 또 2.5단계 해야 될 거 아니에요. 혹시나 걸린 사람들이 퍼지지 않게.
That the president does with Bob Woodward, I think he was trying to.
아까 뉴스 헤드라인에 봤을 때는 완화를 고심하고 있다라고 하는데
The president wasn't willing
못하지.
to level with the American public
자영업자분들이나 장사하시는 분들은 진짜 힘들 것 같아요. 당장 나 같아도 월급이 갑자기 딱 끊긴다 생각하면은 대출도 갚아야 되고 하는데 막막하죠. 일단 저는 운동하겠습니다. 지금 스쿼트 40개 할 차례인데 해볼게요 한번. 저번에도 40개나 했으니까 50개를 못했던 거지.
Yeah, and I mean, if he's willing to tell Bob Woodward that, to suck up to Bob Woodward in their first meeting, who knows what he said to Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin when no one else was in the room and he wanted to impress them.
You know, it's an interesting point because these 18 interviews happened. 2 were in the Oval Office, 1 was at Mar-a-Lago, but the rest were phone calls from the residents late at night. Sometimes Trump would unexpectedly call Woodward at night. Normally, the White House in a normal way records interviews with reporters. I have a feeling that the White House does not know a lot of what President Trump said in these interviews to Bob Woodward.
Woodward also reports on what an aide to General Mattis heard the president say in the Oval Office about military general.
So just to stress, this aide is named. He's on the record. He was working for General Mattis. He was at a meeting in the Oval Office about a trade deal. And just to tell you what he said he heard was he goes to General Mattis and he says, the president said, my effing generals are a bunch of, you can read it up on the screen. They care more about their alliances than they do about trade deals.
I'm assuming that word is not patsies.
No, exactly. General Mattis, then Defense Secretary Mattis, he wasn't born yesterday. He says to his aide, he listens to this story and he said, would you mind writing me an email about that?
어제
So he
40개 했습니다.
memorializes it.
네, 못하겠어. 더워가지고.
Knowing Bob Woodward,
힘들고.
you may very well have a copy of that email.
오늘 여기까지
There were some brutal
하겠습니다.
assessments of Trump's presidency from probably many of the most brutal from many of his former top national security officials.